Welcome to Theory of Pets. I'm a passionate pet owner with a drive to help others like me uncover the truth about the pet industry and what goes on behind the scenes. Fostering a pet is a really unique experience that allows you to help a shelter or rescue organization learn more about the animal that is in their care. Living in a shelter can be a very overwhelming experience for a lot of pets. There are other dogs, cats, small animals. There are strange people in and out all the time. They don't have one consistent caregiver. There are usually multiple caregivers that they need to get used to. It's adjusting to being in a crate or a confined space. There's a lot going on. There's constant changes in the smells and the stimulation, and it can be really overwhelming for a lot of pets. If you sign up to be a foster parent, you can welcome these animals into your home, which allows them to relax and show a little bit more of their real character and charm. You can get to know them, report that information back to the shelter or rescue organization, who then can provide it to potential adoptive parents. My guest today is Sarah Brasky, and she is the founder and executive director of Foster Dogs, Inc. Foster Dogs is a nonprofit organization that connects rescue organizations, adopters, fosters, and other partners in a shared mission to help animals in need. They create a really great environment for these organizations and foster parents to work together. They help with support and communication and really help to build a partnership that allows for the best care and the best ability for the animal to get adopted into a forever home. Now, I wanted to talk to Sarah today, obviously to speak about the importance of fostering, but also to have her talk more about the role of a foster parent. I get a lot of questions from people wondering, what exactly is it that foster parents do? Do you just, keep a cat or a dog in your home until they find a forever family? What do you have to pay for? What does the shelter pay for? A lot of people have some common misconceptions about foster parenting. Some of the most common that I hear that we'll be discussing today. One is that foster parents usually have health conditions. Sometimes that can be true if an animal does need medical care sort of around the clock, that they may need a foster family to provide, or maybe it's a lot more work than the shelter or the rescue organization has the ability to care for. They will look for a foster, but quite often that's not the case at all. Another common misconception is that foster animals are aggressive or very, very introverted and shy, and they want to get them out of the shelter because it's scary for them. And a lot of times they may show those characteristics in the shelter or rescue organization, but once you get them into a home environment, they're not shy, they're not introverted, they actually can become very loving and warm. So that's not always the case. There are other common misconceptions that we're going to talk about today too. So if you have been thinking about fostering, if it's something that you're considering, or maybe if it's something that you've never considered, listen to Sarah, hear what she has to say, and really think about it. I really encourage fostering. It's a great way for people if they don't have the time to have a dog or cat all the time. Sometimes, some people are more busy in the summer months. So maybe during the winter time, it would be nice to foster an animal. Or some people travel a lot for work. And if you travel more during certain times of the year and you're gone a lot, so you can't have a pet, on those times when you're not traveling a lot, you could have a pet. So it's a really great way for people to be able to help out and give back. And of course, it's a fantastic thing for the animals involved to giving them that stepping stone to reach their forever family. So again, I encourage you to really listen to what Sarah has to say and think about fostering, because it really might be a good option for you and your family.
My name is Sarah Brasky. I run Foster Dogs Incorporated, and we are based in New York. I live in New York. I started the organization about 10 years ago, and it was a hobby at the time. It was coming from a need of, I realized that there was no foster hub. There was no main, central resource in the New York area, let alone the whole country. So that people like me, I was just graduated from college, and I just wanted a temporary dog in my home. And so there wasn't really a place where I could learn about how to do that, how to advertise if I had a foster dog, how to get the word out, a resource for me to ask questions of other people. So I just created this blog, and over the years it developed into a nonprofit organization with volunteers and programs, because it was just something that the country and New York City really needed and still needs, is a central place to spread the word about dogs who need homes, who are coming from the shelter, and how to do that. It's not so hard.
It really isn't. And thank you for everything you do. It is such a great cause. And before we start talking more in depth, can you tell us, I know a lot of people think of foster parenting a pet, certain things come to mind, but I think not everybody really understands what it is. So can you tell us what the role of a foster parent for an animal is?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when I started fostering, I would consider myself really, really knowledgeable about dogs, dog breeds, and dog behavior, but I had no formal training. I was not a dog trainer. I was not a veterinarian. I had never been employed by a shelter facility. I had just volunteered, and over the years just learned things just from experience. And so the way I started fostering is that I found out about a program in Manhattan. It's now not in existence anymore, but at the time there was a special program that helped homeless people temporarily foster their pets. And so I fostered my first dog with this organization, and it was a small, blind and deaf, super senior Chihuahua, and he was so easy, too easy. I had thought that I needed a really chill dog. He wouldn't even want to go on walks. He was just he didn't want to do anything, and he was too easy. It was kind of funny, but he was nice. And then once I was done caring for him, he went back to his owner, who had been homeless because her home had a fire. And so it was a really special experience to be able to help in that way. But then a more traditional foster experience was my second time, when I heard about a dog at a shelter in Manhattan who urgently needed a foster home. And while I wasn't necessarily looking for a certain type of dog, I was like, all right, well, I'm flexible. I'll take her. She sounds good. And so the next morning, I picked up this, she was 25 pounds, a mini pitty, pit bull type of mix. And I brought her home with me. I knew almost nothing about her, but that's okay. I just knew that she was nice. And she was in terrible shape. I helped rehabilitate her, gain a few pounds, learn about how to be a dog. And then she got adopted a month later, and now weighs 50 pounds and is doing great. And again, this is 10 years ago, so she's a senior now. But that also was a really beautiful experience, to be able to take a dog who was a mess and miserable, and ended up, becoming happy and adopted. And because I took this dog home with me when she needed someone, that saved her life. And it also benefited the adopter, who was able to learn more about the dog and was able to meet the dog in a casual way out in the park, versus when a dog is stressed out at the shelter. So it was cool to be able to make that happen. A typical foster experience is, there's no set standard of what is fostering. Each dog is different. Each person is different. Each shelter is different. There are private, small rescue groups. There are huge shelter facilities. So the concept, though, is the same, is that you take a dog that needs a home and doesn't have a home, and you treat that dog as if he or she was your own, and you help that dog either get adopted or what other outcome the shelter wants. Maybe the dog is just a temporary placement while they're waiting for their family to come back from an emergency situation. Maybe there's a soldier who needs foster placement for their dog. So there's different types, but it's all the idea of opening your home to an animal who's in need of a home. And it's just a beautiful thing. One thing I want to add is that with fostering, it should be relatively low cost. Sometimes it's totally free, depending on the rescue group you work with, where they'll provide everything you need. Sometimes you're asked to provide bedding or food, and sometimes they'll provide that. But typically, you're not expected to pay medical expenses. And that's a big thing, because that's what is the most expensive. So it's really cool. You get to have a dog without having the financial commitment of having a dog.
That is important to note. I know a lot of people, when I talk about fostering, people assume that foster dogs are like, they have behavior problems or health issues or, there's a certain reason why they can't stay in the shelter. And people worry about that. But, as you explained, it could be any dog for any number of reasons. And typically, at least the bulk of the expenses aren't usually paid by the foster parent, unless, of course, they wanted to donate that. But typically the shelter will take care of that. So it's really not a super expensive endeavor.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. And we like to remind people that at Foster Dogs, where this is not something that we're asking people to put their life savings into, because you're already putting your emotion into it. You're opening your home. Sometimes you are spending money if you want to take the dog on, a journey around the city and you want to pay for cabs or you have to rent a car. So there are some costs that may come up, and it's your choice if you want to make them. But dogs don't need much, if you want to use your old, throwaway Tupperware as the dog's bowl, that's fine. You don't need to buy expensive ceramic, just porcelain displays. You don't have to buy a top-of-the-line bed. You can sometimes borrow from people or get on Craigslist, a crate. So there's cheap ways around what otherwise would be an expensive commitment, and it feels really good. I mean, once you've seen that dog go from either scared or lonely or skinny or having medical problems and then getting better, and then you get to ideally see that dog get adopted or move on to their next chapter, it's such a cool experience to know that you did that. So we know that people who love fostering, it can become an obsession and an addiction, and in a really good way.
Absolutely. And speaking of that, if somebody listening did want to become a foster parent, how would they get started with that, and what does that process look like?
Yeah, depending on where you are in the country, I would say the first place to look is your local city shelter. Often people are scared to go to the shelter, the municipal shelter in their area, because, maybe the dog might be euthanized there. Maybe it's not a beautiful facility. Maybe the staff isn't as welcoming as when you went to a smaller boutique type of no-kill shelter. So you have to sort of put that aside and you say, well, I'm doing this for the right reasons, which is I want to be able to help the dog in need. And if you sort of lower your expectations of what the shelter might look like or how you might be spoken to, some shelters are doing an amazing job at all of that, and they have beautiful facilities, and they really invest in their staff. And some have tight budgets, and the city hasn't allocated enough budget to make, the shelter experience a more positive one. So that being said, try your local shelter, see if they have a foster program. If they do not, then I would imagine that if you look on Pet Finder and you search your zip code, there are lots of rescue groups, at least if not super close to you, then within, a relatively short drive, who would need foster homes. If you're in New York, then apply to our website. We have a foster roster, which is a database, and we have anyone who wants to foster can apply. It takes just a few minutes, and then you're on our database, and we'll reach out to you about opportunities from our rescue affiliate in the New York area. And actually, if anyone who's listening is in the Nashville area, we're piloting a brand new program there to help their city shelter to get more foster homes. So whether or not you're in New York, our website, fosterdogsnyc.com, has lots of frequently asked questions and information, and we even have a manual. It's fosterdogsnyc.com/manual, MANUAL, and it's a really beautiful guide on what to expect when you're prospecting. That's what we call it.
And I'm glad that you mentioned that. So if anybody is listening, your website is packed with some really great information for people that are considering fostering, people that are just kind of starting the process and maybe have some questions or, are having a little bit of trouble getting started. So there's a link to your site underneath this podcast too for anyone listening that wants to check that out. It is a great resource.
Thank you. And I must give a shout out because our website was done completely by volunteer support, and so we redesigned it last year with the user in mind. So we're excited to be able to show off fostering in a beautiful way, hopefully user friendly. And the way we're able to function as an organization is through the help of volunteers. So just wanted to give a little shout out because sometimes people can't foster. Sometimes they can't go to a shelter and walk a dog, but there are other ways to help. And if you can't foster, definitely talk to your local shelters and rescue groups to see if there's other ways. Maybe they need an accounting volunteer. Maybe they need someone who can help design a poster, photographers. So there's just endless opportunities of ways to use your existing skills to benefit animals.
For sure. And let's say that you get a foster. I know all organizations try their hardest to place a dog that's going to meet a family's lifestyle and environment needs. But let's say you do get a foster dog placed and it's not working out for whatever reason. I'm sure that's a worry for some people going into it. What would happen if that were the case?
Yeah, that can happen. I would say my best piece of advice with fostering is go with the flow and try your hardest to make it work. There are situations when if you bring home a dog as a foster and let's say something happens, your resident cat and your new foster dog are really going at it and it's getting to a dangerous point and you can't manage it and you feel overwhelmed, that's okay. And you shouldn't feel like you're stuck. It certainly can happen where you bite off more than you can chew and you didn't realize that you're not emotionally ready for a pet. But I would say the first thing to do is just really try your best because there's no perfect dog, there's no perfect person, and it's such a positive thing to be able to just try because the shelter or rescue group is going to then take the dog back either to their facility or to either to their facility or to another foster home. And that's obviously, it's not a terrible thing if the dog moves to a different foster home. Maybe it's a better placement. But it's important to really kind of understand that when you're committing to a dog, often it's sight unseen. You don't get to meet them in advance. Sometimes you can. And you want to learn. You want to ask other people for advice. Sometimes a trainer can be provided to you, or a dog can be sent to a veterinarian if it's a medical problem. So you shouldn't ever feel stuck. But if you do feel like you've exhausted all ideas and resources, then yeah, it's definitely not the end of the world to say, I can't handle this. This is too much, and we need to figure out a solution.
And I would imagine that one of the other things that keeps people from fostering would be the worry that it's going to be difficult to say goodbye to the animal when a forever family is found. What advice would you give those potential foster parents?
Oh, it's the number one thing that we get asked and also told as a response of like, I can't foster. I'm going to be too sad when I have to get the dog out.
Yeah.
And yes, like you do get attached. If you didn't love dogs, you wouldn't be doing this in the first place. So it's a very normal feeling, and it is going to be tough. But at the same time, you have to think about it in like a little more of a macro level and say, well, I'm doing this because I wanted to save a life, and I also wanted to help that dog move to another chapter, to get adopted. If I can do that with this dog, I'm going to do it again with the next dog, and the next dog, and the next dog. And so you're able to use all that knowledge from each time you foster and bring that to the next dog, and you really become an expert. There's people who are in our program in the New York City area who fostered hundreds of animals, dogs and cats, and different types, and each one is different. Sometimes they're easy and they fit right into your home, and sometimes they keep you up at night. It's a challenge. Sometimes it's really tough because you actually grow like super attached, and it's more difficult than with the previous dog to say goodbye. There are times when you can adopt your foster dog. That's not an uncommon thing, but we recommend that people just do it over and over again, foster. And if you do keep your animal, then it doesn't mean you can't foster again. And then your resident pet becomes a foster brother or sister to a new animal and helps them out.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. It is such a rewarding experience. And you mentioned a little bit earlier, knowing that you helped a dog, maybe if they had some behaviors that, the stress from the shelter was bringing out, or they needed some extra help with certain training or things like that. And you got them to the point where they became adoptable and found a family. There is something very rewarding about that. And it makes you feel really good and very proud of what you did.
Yeah, it's a really good feeling. That's part of the reward. You're not paid to be a foster. You're not making big bucks, but you feel like you made a difference. And so it's just such a cool feeling to be able to make that happen.
Is there anything else about fostering pets or Foster Dogs Inc. that you'd like our listeners to know?
Sure. Well, I would say that, to reiterate, if anyone's interested in fostering, definitely learn more on our website, where if you're not in the New York City area, there's a lot of questions that can be answered through our frequently asked questions. We have a group on Facebook. If you're an active foster parent anywhere in the country, we encourage you to join our Facebook group. It's called Foster Forum, FORUM, and you can request to join. And it's a chat room of people who are fostering, who ask questions of each other, provide advice. Sometimes in the middle of the night, someone might say, my new foster hasn't stopped whining. What do I do? And then 5 people will respond, it's okay. Here's some tips. A lot of the experience is just about kind of pushing through a challenge and figuring out a solution. And usually there is a solution. And what I'd love to say to the readers is to the listeners is do what you can. And if it isn't fostering or adopting, then go volunteer at the shelter, help behind the scenes, donate. You can also get there's corporate matching programs, participate in shelter events. So there's always ways that you can help, even if it's not a traditional adoption or foster type of commitment. And there's always more need for foster homes. There are too many dogs and other types of animals. There are too many animals in shelters and not enough people taking them home. If more dogs got out of shelters, then so many more lives could be saved, because it opens up space, and it also allows for those dogs to not have those behavioral problems that they would have developed at the shelter. So it's just fostering kind of this magical solution, and I hope that more people are encouraged to start.
I do as well. And like you said, if you can't foster, if you can't adopt, shelters are in need of so many things, from just clerical work in their office to cleaning, dog walking, whatever your skills are. I love, you mentioned earlier, if passion for photography is your thing, they might need, pictures of their pets to put on their website or something like that. So whatever your passion is, they can definitely find a spot for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's always worth asking and getting in touch and offering your support.
And a huge thank you again to Sarah Brasky for being my guest today. As I said in the beginning of this podcast, I highly encourage you, if it's something that you've been thinking about or something that, after listening to this podcast, you think it might be something that you could help with, get in touch with your local shelter or rescue organization. A quick Google search can give you tons of information on places in your area. I guarantee you that every shelter and rescue is always looking for foster families, and if for some reason they don't need a foster family right now, there's tons that you could do to volunteer and help out. So I appreciate you guys listening today. If you have any questions for me or for Sarah, please jump onto our website, theoryofpets.com. You can find the link right below this podcast. You can send those questions along, and if I can't answer them for you, I'd certainly pass them along to Sarah and see if we could get the answers that you're looking for. While you're on our site, if you could take just a second to leave me a quick review, that really helps when I'm reaching out to experts to come on the podcast. So thanks for tuning in, guys. I'll be back with another hot topic very soon.